The Great Chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest room ever built by any civilization in the known universe. Its ceiling stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed beneath it. Its walls were made of living crystal that glowed with the light of 1,000 captured stars. Representatives from over 200 species sat in tiered seats that rose like mountains on every side, their bodies ranging from insectoid to reptilian to forms that defied easy description. At the very bottom of this magnificent space, in seats that were smaller and less comfortable than all the others, sat the human delegation. Ambassador Daniel Harper had grown used to looking up at the alien faces that surrounded him. He had spent 15 years in this chamber, listening to debates about trade routes and territorial disputes and the countless small conflicts that kept the galaxy turning. He had learned to read the body language of creatures who communicated through pheromones and color changes and sounds that human ears could barely hear. He had become, by any measure, one of the finest diplomats humanity had ever produced, and none of it had ever mattered. Today was supposed to be different. Today, after 300 years of loyal service to the Council, humanity was finally being considered for full membership. No longer would they be mere observers, permitted to watch, but forbidden to vote. No longer would their voices be ignored in the great decisions that shaped galactic civilization. Today, at last, they would be recognized as equals. The Valanthia High Chancellor rose from his elevated platform at the center of the chamber. His name was Xyloth, and he was a creature of nightmares to human eyes. 8 feet tall, covered in black chitin that gleamed like polished obsidian, with compound eyes that reflected the light in 1,000 fractured images. His species had ruled this region of space for 50,000 years, and they had never let anyone forget it. The Council has considered the petition submitted by the human delegation, Xyloth announced. His voice translated into 100 languages simultaneously. After careful review of humanity's history, capabilities, and contributions to galactic society, Atiqwe have reached a decision. Denya felt his heart beating faster. Around him, the other members of the human delegation leaned forward in their seats. Ambassador Linda Morrison, his second-in-command, reached over and squeezed his hand. This was it. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. The petition is denied, Xyloth said. Humanity will remain in observer status for the foreseeable future. For a moment, Daniel could not process the words. He had been so certain. All the signs had pointed toward acceptance. The backroom conversations, the private assurances, the carefully negotiated compromises. It had all been leading to this moment, and it had all been for nothing. On what grounds? Daniel heard himself asking. His voice sounded strange and distant to his own ears. Xyloth's. Mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or contempt. The Council has determined that humanity lacks the maturity required for full participation in galactic affairs. Your species is too young, too aggressive, and too unpredictable. Perhaps in another 1,000 years, when you have demonstrated your ability to control your baser impulses, this decision can be revisited. A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. Daniel saw heads nodding among the Korathi delegation, ancient beings who measured their lives in centuries. The Draloxian trade ministers exchanged satisfied glances, no doubt already calculating how this decision would benefit their ongoing exploitation of human markets. Something changed in Daniel at that moment. Something that had been building for years, decades, centuries, finally broke free. He stood up. The murmuring stopped. In 300 years of council sessions, no human representative had ever stood without being given permission to speak. It simply was not done. 300 years, Daniel said. His voice was calm, but it carried to every corner of the vast chamber. For 300 years, humanity has served this council. We have followed your rules. We have respected your traditions. We have done everything you asked of us, and more. He began walking forward toward the center of the chamber. Security drones hummed to life around him, but something in his manner made them hesitate. When the Vorn swarm attacked the outer reaches, who answered the call? Human soldiers. We lost 40,000 men and women at the Battle of Epsilon Ceti, holding the line while your fleets retreated to safety. The Valantha commanders called it a tactical withdrawal, We called it what it was: cowardice. Zeloth's compound eyes narrowed dangerously. Ambassador Harper, you are out of order. When the Dark Nebula anomaly threatened to destroy the Karathi homeworld, who found the solution? Human scientists. Our people worked for 18 months straight, without sleep, without rest, because your greatest minds had given up hope. And when we succeeded, when we saved 12 billion Karathi lives, do you know what we received in return? A formal letter of appreciation, signed by a junior clerk. He was at the center of the chamber now, standing directly beneath the High Chancellor's platform. Every eye in the room was fixed on him. You call us young, but we have accomplished more in 3 centuries than most species accomplish in 3 millennia. You call us aggressive, but we have only ever used our strength to defend those who could not defend themselves. You call us unpredictable, but perhaps that is because you have never bothered to understand us. Daniel reached into his coat and pulled out a small device. It was a standard communication unit, the kind that every diplomat carried for official announcements. I am authorized by the United Earth government to make the following statement, he said. Effective immediately, humanity is withdrawing from the Galactic Council. All treaties, trade agreements, and mutual defense pacts between Earth and Council member states are hereby terminated. Human forces will evacuate all Council space within 30 standard days. After that time, any Council vessel that enters human territory will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted and screamed and made sounds that human throats could never produce. Security drones swarmed around Daniel, but he ignored them completely. You have spent 300 years teaching us that we do not belong here, said, his voice somehow cutting through the noise. Congratulations. We have finally learned the lesson. He turned and began walking toward the exit. The crowd parted before him, whether from shock or fear he could not tell. Ambassador Harper, Zeloth called after him. You cannot simply leave. There are procedures, protocols. You cannot just abandon 3 centuries of diplomatic relations. Daniel paused at the door and looked back. For just a moment, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of what he was doing. He was not just ending a partnership. He was changing the course of galactic history. Watch us, he said. Then he walked through the door and did not look back. Outside, the human delegation was already moving toward their shuttle. Linda Morrison fell into step beside him, her face pale but determined. Did we really just do that? She asked. We did. The Council will not accept this. They will come after us. Daniel looked up at the alien sky, at stars that humanity had traveled between for 3 centuries. Let them try, he said quietly. Let them try, and let them learn what happens when they push humanity too far. The shuttle doors closed behind them, and they rose into the sky, leaving the Galactic Council behind forever. 6 months passed, and the galaxy began to fall apart. Admiral Catherine Cole stood on the bridge of the Earth vessel Resolute, watching the endless darkness of space through the main viewport. Behind her, the soft hum of computers and the quiet voices of her crew provided a familiar comfort. This had been her home for 20 years, this ship and others like it. She had fought pirates and rebels and alien threats from one end of human space to the other, but she had never done anything as hard as what she was doing now. Another distress signal. Admiral reported Lieutenant Commander Samuel Grant from the communications station. He was young, barely 30, with the kind of eager idealism that Catherine remembered having once, long ago. Dralaxian convoy under attack. Vorn raiders? Looks like a full hunting pack. Catherine did not turn around. Location. Approximately 4 light-years inside Council space. Then it is not our concern. Samuel hesitated. She could feel his discomfort without looking at him. Ma'am, the convoy includes civilian transport ships. There are families on board. Children. Catherine closed her eyes for a moment. She had known this would be the hardest part. Not the isolation, not the uncertainty, not even the knowledge that they were gambling with humanity's future. It was this. Standing by while people suffered because those people belonged to governments that had treated humanity like dirt for 3 centuries. Log the signal and continue our patrol, she said. We do not enter Council space. Those are our orders. With respect, Admiral, Those are people dying out there, I know. Catherine finally turned to face him. Her face was hard, but her eyes held something that might have been sympathy. Do you think I enjoy this? Do you think any of us enjoy watching the galaxy tear itself apart? Samuel said nothing. The Council had 300 years to treat us as partners, Catherine continued. 300 years to recognize that our lives had value. Instead, they used us. They sent us to fight their wars and clean up air messes, and then they patted us on the head and told us to wait another millennium for basic respect. She shook her head. We did not start this, Lieutenant Commander. We simply stopped allowing them to take advantage of us. If the whole galaxy burns because of it... Catherine was silent for a long moment. Then she turned back to the viewport. Then the galaxy burns. And maybe next time, they will think twice before treating their allies like servants. Across the Council's vast territory, the consequences of humanity's departure were becoming impossible to ignore. The Vorn had been a nuisance for centuries, raiding ships and colonies at the edges of civilized space. But they had always been kept in check by human military power. Human ships were faster and more maneuverable than anything the Council's species could produce. Human tactics were creative and unpredictable, confusing enemies who had spent millennia fighting the same predictable wars. Without human protection, the Vorn grew bold. They struck deeper and deeper into Council territory, destroying convoys, capturing colonies, taking slaves by the thousands. The Volanthi dispatched their own fleets to stop them. But the insectoid warriors who had once conquered half the galaxy discovered that they had forgotten how to fight. Their strategies were old and outdated. Their commanders were politicians who had never seen real combat. Against the savage cunning of the Vorn raiders, they fell apart like paper in a storm. The Korathi fared no better. Their ancient civilization had grown soft over the millennia, relying on robots and automation to handle everything from farming to defense. When the Vorn attacked their outer colonies, the Korathi discovered that machines could not match the desperate creativity of living warriors. 3 worlds fell in 3 months. Their populations scattered or enslaved, and then there were the economic consequences. Dr. Lisa Morgan sat in her office on Mars, surrounded by holographic displays showing data from across the galaxy. As the head of Earth's Strategic Analysis Division, it was her job to understand what was happening and predict what would happen next. Right now, the predictions were not good. The Dralaxian economy has contracted by 40%, she said into her recording device. Their entire trading system was built on cheap goods extracted from human colonies. Without access to human markets, they cannot sustain their population centers. Food riots have already broken out on 17 worlds. She switched to another display. The Volanthi are facing a different crisis. Their military losses against the Vorn have created a leadership vacuum. 3 different factions are now competing for control of the High Chancellor's position. If open civil war breaks out, the entire hive mind structure could collapse. Another display, another disaster. The Korathi are simply retreating. They have abandoned their outer territories entirely and are pulling back to their core systems. Their strategy seems to be to wait out the chaos and rebuild later. But our projections suggest that the chaos may last for decades, possibly centuries. Lisa leaned back in her chair and rubbed her tired eyes. She had not slept properly in weeks. Every day brought new reports of suffering and destruction. Every day she had to remind herself why humanity was staying out of it, because they had tried helping. For 300 years, they had tried, and all it had gotten them was contempt and exploitation, and the certain knowledge that no matter what they did, it would never be enough. Her communication panel chimed. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to President Victor Reyes, the leader of the United Earth government. He looked as tired as she felt. Dr. Morgan, I need your assessment on something. To course. Sir, we have detected movement in the outer rim. Long-range sensors have picked up a large formation of vessels heading toward Council space. Victor paused. We believe they are hollow. Lisa felt her blood run cold. The hollow were the galaxy's oldest nightmare. A machine intelligence that had emerged from somewhere beyond the edge of known space. They had destroyed a dozen civilizations before anyone even knew they existed. They did not conquer, or negotiate, or trade. They simply consumed, converting entire populations into fuel for their endless expansion. The only thing that had stopped them, 50 years ago, was a massive combined fleet led by human admirals using human tactics. The Battle of the Shroud had cost humanity 200,000 lives, but it had driven the Hollow back into the darkness. Now they were returning, and there was no combined fleet to stop them. How many ships? Lisa asked. At least 200 high vessels. Probably more. They are moving slowly, methodically. Our best estimate puts them at the Council's outer territories in approximately 8 months. Can the Council stop them? Victor's laugh was bitter and humorless. The Council cannot stop the Vorn. What do you think they will do against the Hollow? Lisa stared at the data on her screens. 200 Hollow vessels, each one capable of stripping an entire planet of life. Each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a fleet. If we do nothing, she said slowly, the Council will fall. The Hollow will consume everything between here and the core. Yes, billions will die. Maybe hundreds of billions, yes. Lisa looked at the President's face on her screen. She saw the weight of the decision pressing down on him. She saw the knowledge that whatever he chose, people would suffer. What are you going to do? She asked. Victor was silent for a long moment. I do not know, he admitted. Part of me wants to let them burn. After everything they did to us, after all the times they used us and then threw us away, part of me thinks they deserve what is coming. And the other part remembers that we are human. Victor's voice was soft. We help people. Even people who do not deserve it. Even people who have hurt us. That is who we are. That is what makes us different from all the others. He straightened in his chair. Prepare a full strategic analysis. I want options, possibilities, everything you can think of. We have 8 months to decide whether to save the galaxy or watch it die. Yes, sir. The screen went dark, and Lisa turned back to her work. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of the map, the Hollow were coming, and humanity had to decide what kind of species they wanted to be. The council chamber had changed since Daniel Harper walked out of it 6 months ago. The living crystal walls still glowed, but dimmer now, as power rationing forced conservation measures across the capital. The tiered seats that had once held hundreds of delegates were mostly empty. Many representatives had fled back to their homeworlds, either to prepare defenses or simply to be with their families when the end came. High Chancellor Xyloth stood at his elevated platform, looking down at what remained of galactic civilization. The Valanthi, Karathi, and Dralaxian delegations were present, along with a handful of smaller species. Altogether, perhaps 40 beings occupied a space designed for 2,000. We must send another delegation, said Ambassador Relith of the Korathi. He was ancient, even by his species standards, with skin like cracked leather and eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. The humans must be made to understand what is at stake. We have sent for delegations, Xyloth replied warily. Each time, they turn our ships away at the border. They will not receive our communications. They will not acknowledge our existence. Then we offer them more. Full membership, reparations, territory, whatever they want. Trade Minister Vexel of the Drilixian Consortium laughed bitterly. He had grown thin since the crisis began, his once magnificent robes hanging loose on his frame. You think they want membership now? You think they care about territory? He shook his head. We had 300 years to give them what they deserved. 300 years of using them, mocking them, treating them like animals. And now you want to buy their help with the same things we denied them when it mattered? Then what would you suggest? Xyloth demanded. Before Vexel could answer, a young Valanthi officer burst into the chamber. Her carapace was clicking with agitation, a sure sign of extreme emotion among her species. High Chancellor, forgive the interruption. A human ship has appeared at the border. They are requesting permission to enter council space. Every being in the chamber went still. Grant them passage immediately, Xyloth said. Prepare the formal reception hall. Whatever dignity we have left, we will show it to these humans. 3 days later, the human vessel arrived at the council capital. Special. Envoy Margaret Sullivan stepped off her shuttle and into the receiving area where the Council's surviving leaders had gathered. She was 62 years old, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that had seen more than most humans ever would. For 40 years she had served in the diplomatic corps, navigating the treacherous waters of galactic politics. She had watched humanity's pride be crushed, again and again, by species who considered themselves superior. Now she had come to deliver humanity's answer to the Council's desperate pleas. The reception hall was smaller than the main chamber, but no less impressive. Ancient artifacts from 100 worlds lined the walls. Crystalline sculptures that had taken centuries to grow stood in alcoves of polished metal. Everything spoke of power and permanence, and the absolute certainty that the Council would endure. Forever Margaret walked through it all without a second glance. The Council. Leaders had arranged themselves in a formal receiving line. Xyloth stood at the front, flanked by Relith and Vexel, and the representatives of a dozen other species. They had dressed in their finest ceremonial garments, displayed their most sacred symbols of office. Margaret stopped in front of them and said nothing. She simply waited. Xyloth was the first to speak. Envoy Sullivan, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I welcome you to our capital. Your presence here is a sign of hope in dark times. Let us skip the formalities, Margaret said. Her voice was flat and cold. You are dying, and you want us to save you. Again, the delegates shifted uncomfortably. This was not how diplomacy was supposed to work. There were rituals, traditions, carefully choreographed exchanges that allowed everyone to preserve their dignity. Margaret had no interest in preserving anyone's dignity. The situation is indeed grave, Xyloth admitted. The Hollow advance has exceeded our worst projections. Our fleets have been unable to slow their progress. Your fleets have been destroyed in every engagement, Margaret corrected. The third Volanthi Armada lasted approximately 4 hours at Nexus Station. The Karathi Reserve Fleet retreated without firing a shot. The Dralaxian Defense Force has relocated to the opposite end of the galaxy. Each word landed like a physical blow. The delegates could not meet her eyes. You have lost 63 systems in 7 months, Margaret continued. The Hollow have captured or killed an estimated 4 billion sentient beings. Your industrial capacity has been cut in half. Your supply lines are in chaos. Your population is in a state of mass panic. She paused. Does that summary accurately reflect your situation? Xyloth's voice was barely a whisper. Yes. Good. Margaret reached into her coat and produced a small data crystal. She placed it on a pedestal in front of her, and a holographic display sprang to life. This contains the terms under which humanity will consider intervening in the Hollow conflict. I suggest you review them carefully. Xyloth took the crystal with trembling appendages. As he read through the terms, his compound eyes widened in shock. These terms would dissolve the Council, he said slowly. They would place humanity in permanent oversight of galactic affairs? Also yes. Ambassador Relith surged forward, his ancient dignity forgotten. This is unconscionable. You would use our moment of weakness to seize power over the entire galaxy. Margaret looked at him calmly. I would remind the ambassador that we did not create this moment of weakness. We did not invite the Hollow to attack. We did not fail to prepare adequate defenses. We did not spend 3 centuries systematically mistreating the one species willing to stand between you and extinction. She turned to address the entire assembly. For 300 years, humanity asked for nothing but fair treatment, equal standing, recognition that our lives and our sacrifices had value. Every time we were denied. Every time we were told to wait, to be patient, to accept our place at the bottom of your hierarchy. Her voice hardened. Well, now the hierarchy is gone. The old order is dead, killed by your own arrogance. What remains is a choice. Accept a new order under human guidance, or face the Hollow alone. Xyloth looked at the crystal in his hand, then at the faces of his fellow delegates. He saw fear there, and resentment, and wounded pride. But he also saw the truth that none of them could deny. They had no other choice. How long do we have to consider these terms? He asked. Margaret checked her timepiece. The Hollow Vanguard will reach the inner systems in approximately 3 weeks. I would suggest you decide before then.
Oh.
She turned and walked toward the exit.
Boy.
Sullivan Zyloff called after her. If we accept these terms, can humanity actually defeat the Hollow? Margaret paused at the door. For the first time, something like a smile crossed her face. Hi, Chancellor. You spent 300 years convincing yourselves that humans were inferior. In all that time, did you ever stop to wonder how a species as young as ours managed to survive in a galaxy full of ancient powers who wanted us dead? She did not wait for an answer. We will be in touch. The door closed behind her and silence fell over the chamber. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Zyloth turned to face his fellow council members. We have no choice, he said quietly. We must accept their terms and surrender everything our civilizations have built, Relef demanded. Become servants to a species that was crawling in the mud while we were building empires. Better servants than corpses, Vexel said grimly. I have seen the reports from the occupied territories. The Hollow do not take slaves. They do not negotiate. They simply erase everything they touch, converting living beings into fuel for their machines. If we do not accept humanity's terms, there will be no one left to remember that we ever existed. The vote was held to hours later. It was unanimous. The terms were accepted in full, within hours. The first human warships began crossing the border into council space. The largest military operation in human history had begun. Admiral Catherine Cole stood on the bridge of the Use Guardian, watching the stars blur past as her fleet raced toward the front lines. Through the main viewport, she could see dozens of other warships keeping pace, their running lights blinking in the darkness like a swarm of angry fireflies. 400 capital ships, 2,000 support vessels, 3 million soldiers, sailors, and marines. It was the largest military deployment in human history, and Catherine commanded it all. Impressive sight, said Captain Dennis Parker, her executive officer. He was a tall man with graying hair and the kind of calm confidence that came from 20 years of combat experience. It should be, Catherine replied. We have been preparing for this for 50 years. Dennis raised an eyebrow. 50 years. But we only left the council 6 months ago. Catherine allowed herself a small smile. Did you think the withdrawal was spontaneous? We knew this day would come eventually. The only question was when. She gestured at the assembled fleet. Every ship you see was designed with the Hollow in mind. Every weapon system, every tactical doctrine, every piece of equipment. We have been wargaming this scenario since before you were born. Then why did we wait so long to act? People have been dying for months. Because we needed the council to understand what they had lost. And we needed them to ask for help rather than demand it. Catherine's smile faded. This time, when we save them, they will remember who did it. And they will remember why. The fleet arrived at the Vareth system 3 days later. Vareth was a Korathi colony world, home to 5 million beings who had lived peaceful lives farming the rich volcanic soil. They had built cities and schools and hospitals. They had raised families and celebrated holidays and dreamed of the future. Now 90 hollow hive ships orbited their planet. Methodically harvesting the population, the Hollow did not look like ships in the traditional sense. They were vast organic structures, each one miles across, covered in spines and tendrils that pulsed with an inner light. They had no crews in the normal sense. The ships themselves were alive, or something close to it. Directed by a machine intelligence that had existed for millions of years, as Catherine watched, streams of smaller craft descended from the hive ships to the planet below. Collection pods, they were called. Each one could carry 1,000 prisoners back to the mother ships, where they would be processed and converted into additional computing capacity for the Hollow collective mind. All ships. This is Admiral Cole, Catherine said over the fleet-wide channel. We engage in 5 minutes. Remember your training, trust your instincts, and fight for each other. Today we remind the galaxy why they needed us in the first place. She turned to her tactical officer, Lieutenant Patricia Dean. Execute attack pattern Omega-7. Patricia's fingers danced across her console, all ships acknowledging. Pattern Omega-7 initiated. The human fleet split into dozens of smaller formations, each one moving to a specific position around the hollow armada. It looked chaotic, almost random, but there was a precise logic behind every movement. The hollow were used to fighting enemies who attacked in rigid formations following predictable patterns. Human tactics were different. Human tactics were designed to confuse. The first wave of missiles launched simultaneously from 300 ships. They were not aimed at the hollow vessels directly. Instead, they targeted the space around them, filling the area with electromagnetic interference that disrupted the communications between hive-ships. The hollow responded exactly as predicted. They began to cluster together, seeking to re-establish their network connections. In doing so, they created exactly the kind of dense formation that human weapons were designed to destroy. Second wave. Fire, Catherine ordered. This time, the missiles were armed with warheads that contained compressed antimatter. They struck the clustered hollow ships and detonated, releasing energy equivalent to small nuclear weapons. 17 hive ships were destroyed in the first volley. The battle had begun. For 4 hours, the human fleet danced around the hollow armada. They struck and retreated, drew the enemy into ambushes, exploited every weakness in their formation. When hollow boarding parties tried to capture human vessels, they found themselves facing Marines, equipped with weapons that could tear apart their machine bodies at the molecular level. The hollow tried to adapt. They changed their formations, altered their tactics, attempted to predict human movements, but the humans changed faster. Every time the hollow thought, they understood what was happening. The humans did something unexpected. It was, Catherine reflected during a brief lull in the fighting, the fundamental difference between machine and human intelligence. The hollow were brilliant in their own way, capable of calculations that would take human computers centuries to complete. But they thought in patterns, in algorithms, in predictable sequences. Humans thought in leaps and bounds. They made connections that did not logically follow. They took risks that no rational being would consider. They found solutions that should not have existed. The hollow had destroyed a dozen civilizations, but they had never faced anything like humanity. By the end of the 4th hour, 83 hollow hive ships had been destroyed. Human losses totaled 7 vessels. The surviving hollow ships broke formation and fled into the darkness of space. It was the first time in recorded history that a hollow force had retreated from an engagement. On the surface of Vareth, 3 million Karathi survivors emerged from their hiding places to find human transport ships already descending. Medical teams fanned out across the devastated cities, treating the wounded, distributing food and water, helping the shell-shocked population begin to recover. A young Karathi female approached one of the human medics. A woman named Susan Harper, who was treating an injured child. The Karathi asked. Her voice was hoarse from days of screaming. Why did you come? After everything we did to your people, why did you save us? Susan looked up from her work. She was exhausted, covered in alien blood and dust, but she managed a tired smile. Because you needed help, she said simply. That is what humans do. News of the victory at Vareth spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. For months, the Council species had lived in terror of the hollow advance. They had watched their fleets destroyed, their colonies consumed, their civilizations pushed to the brink of extinction. They had believed, many of them, that the end was near. Now, suddenly, there was hope. On 100 worlds, beings of every species gathered to watch recordings of the battle. They saw human ships moving with impossible speed and precision. They saw hollow hive ships exploding under coordinated assaults. They saw the machines that had haunted their nightmares for generations finally being beaten. And they began to understand what humanity has been trying to tell them for 3 centuries. The humans were not primitive. They were not inferior. They were not a young species waiting to grow into maturity. They were something else entirely. Something the galaxy had never seen before. a species that combined intelligence with creativity, discipline with flexibility, compassion with the absolute willingness to fight for what they believed in. The elder races had looked at humanity and seen only what they expected to see. Short-lived beings who would never achieve the wisdom of ancient civilizations, emotional creatures who could not match the cold logic of minds that had existed for millennia. They had been wrong, and now, as human fleets pushed deeper into hollow-occupied territory, liberating world after world, species after species, the elder races began to realize just how wrong they had been. Admiral Catherine Cole stood on the bridge of the Guardian, watching another liberated system recede into the distance. Her fleet had been fighting for 3 months straight, moving from battle to battle without rest. Her people were exhausted, pushed to the limits of human endurance, but they kept fighting, because that was what humans did. Admiral Dennis said quietly, "We have received a message from Earth Command. President Reyes wants to speak with you personally." Catherine nodded and moved to her private communications room. When the president's face appeared on the screen, she saw something she had not seen in months. He was smiling. "Admiral Cole, I wanted to congratulate you personally. The Hollow have been driven back to the Outer Rim. Our analysts believe we have destroyed over 80% of their invasion force." "Thank you, sir. The credit belongs to the men and women serving under me, belongs to all of humanity." Victor's smile faded slightly. "But the war is not over. Our scouts have detected the Hollow's main concentration at the edge of the galaxy. Thousands of ships gathered for a final stand." Catherine felt a chill run down her spine. How many thousands? We are not certain, but enough to destroy everything we have accomplished if they are not stopped. Then we stop them. "Damn." Victor nodded slowly. "I am authorizing Operation Final Dawn. You will command the combined human fleet in an assault on the Hollow's last stronghold." He paused. "Catherine, this will be the largest battle in human history. The fate of the entire galaxy will depend on its outcome." Catherine stood straighter. "We will not fail, sir." "I know you will not." Victor's smile returned. "Go show the galaxy what humanity is made of." The screen went dark, and Catherine returned to the bridge. Around her, her crew looked up expectantly. "Set course for the Outer Rim," she ordered. "We have one more battle to fight." The edge of the galaxy was a place where stars grew thin and darkness stretched to infinity. Here at the boundary between known space and the endless void beyond, the Hollow had gathered for their final stand. Admiral Catherine Cole looked at the tactical display and felt her heart sink. 4,000 hive ships. 4,000 of the vast organic structures that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years. They hung in space like a wall of death, their bioluminescent surfaces pulsing with malevolent energy. Against them, Catherine had 600 vessels. The entire combined fleet of humanity and the council races, every ship that could be spared, every warrior who could be found. It was not enough. By any rational calculation, it could not possibly be enough. Catherine looked around the bridge of the Guardian. Her crew was silent, staring at the same display she was. They all knew the odds. They all understood that most of them would not survive the coming battle. But none of them suggested retreat. "Open a channel to all ships," Catherine said quietly. The communications officer nodded. "Channel open, Admiral." Catherine took a deep breath. "This is Admiral Cole to all vessels. In a few minutes, we will engage the largest enemy force any of us has ever faced. I will not lie to you about our chances. They are not good. Many of us will not live to see tomorrow." She paused, looking at the faces of her crew. "But I want you to remember something. 3 years ago, humanity walked away from a galaxy that had treated us with nothing but contempt. We could have stayed away. We could have let the Hollow consume everything outside our borders and been safe. No one would have blamed us. Instead, we chose to come back. We chose to fight for people who never showed us kindness, to die for species who never acknowledged our worth. Not because we wanted power or recognition or revenge, but because we knew it was right. That is what makes us human. Not our technology or our tactics. Our choice to stand up for others, even when they do not deserve it. Our refusal to accept that strength should be used only for ourselves. She straightened in her chair. Today we fight for the galaxy. For every species that ever looked down on us, for every world that will never know we existed, we fight because that is who we are. And whatever happens, I am proud to serve with every single one of you. She looked at the tactical display one last time. All ships. Attack. The battle that followed would be remembered for as long as intelligent beings existed in the galaxy. The human fleet struck the Hollow formation like a fist, driving deep into the heart of the enemy armada. Around them, council ships followed, their crews inspired by human courage to fight with a ferocity they had never shown before. The Hollow responded with overwhelming force. Thousands of ships converged on the attackers, unleashing weapons that could vaporize entire moons. Human vessels exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Council ships were torn apart by the dozen. But the Allied fleet kept coming. Catherine directed the battle from the Guardian's Bridge, shifting forces, exploiting weaknesses, refusing to give up even as the losses mounted. Her ship was hit multiple times, systems failing, hull breached in a dozen places. Still, she fought on. Dennis Parker was killed when a hollow beam punched through the secondary bridge. Patricia Dean died manning her weapons console until the very end. One by one, the people Catherine had served with for years gave their lives to hold the line. And somehow, impossibly, the tide began to turn. The Hollow had never faced an enemy that would not stop. Their calculations, their predictions, their million years of experience, all of it assumed that organic beings would eventually break, would retreat, would surrender to save themselves. Humans did not retreat. Humans did not surrender. Humans kept fighting until they won or died trying, and somehow that defiance was enough to change everything. Somewhere in the chaos, a human assault team boarded the largest Hollow command ship. They fought their way through corridors filled with machine horrors, losing half their number with every deck they cleared. But they reached the central processing core. They planted charges that ripped the heart out of the Hollow fleet. Without central coordination, the remaining hive ships fell into confusion. Their movements became erratic, their attacks unfocused. And the Allied fleet, battered and bleeding but unbowed, pressed the advantage. The battle lasted 3 days. When it was over, the Hollow were broken. Their fleet was scattered, their command structure destroyed. They fled into the void beyond the galaxy's edge. They did not return. Of the 600 Allied ships that entered the battle, 217 survived. Catherine Cole was among the survivors. She stood on what remained of the Guardian's Bridge. Looking out at the field of debris that marked humanity's greatest victory, around her, the handful of crew members who had made it through the battle worked in silence. Too exhausted for celebration, a communication came through on the emergency channel. It was President Victor Reyes, Admiral Cole. On behalf of the United Earth government and the people of humanity, I want to thank you. What you accomplished today will never be forgotten. Catherine shook her head slowly. Do not thank me, sir. Thank the men and women who gave their lives. Thank the council ships that fought beside us when they had every reason to flee. Thank everyone who believed that the galaxy was worth saving. I will, Victor said softly. But right now, I am thanking you. 1 year later. The ceremony marking the end of the Hollow War was held in a new building constructed on the site of the old council chamber. It was called the Assembly Hall of the Galactic Union, and it had been designed by human architects to represent a new era in galactic history. There were no tiers anymore. No elevated platforms, no seating arrangements that emphasized one species over another. Everyone sat at the same level, facing a central stage where the leaders of the new order would speak. Ambassador Daniel Harper, who had walked out of this place 3 years earlier, now stood at the podium. The assembled delegates, representing hundreds of worlds and dozens of species, watched in respectful silence. 3 years ago, I stood in this room and told you that you would learn what the galaxy looked like without humanity, Daniel said. I hope that lesson was instructive. A murmur of acknowledgement rippled through the assembly. But I did not come here today to gloat or to remind you of past failures. The past is past. What matters now is the future we build together. He looked out at the faces before him. Volanthi and Karathi and Dralaxian and dozens of other species, all watching, all listening.
Ow.
Humanity did not save the galaxy because we wanted power over it. We saved it because that is who we are. When we see suffering, we act to end it. When we see injustice, we fight to correct it. When we see people in need, we help them. This is the truth about humanity that you never understood. Our compassion is not weakness. Our empathy is not foolishness. These qualities are our greatest strength, and they are what allowed us to do what your ancient civilizations could not. He straightened. Let me be clear. We will never again accept the role of servant. We will never again sacrifice our people for those who despise us. The new order ensures that no species will be treated the way humanity was treated. All voices will be heard. All contributions recognized. All lives valued. This is not human dominance. This is human justice. And if you can learn to embrace it, we can build a galaxy that is stronger and fairer than anything that came before. He stepped back from the podium. The Galactic Union is now in session. The years that followed, the predictions of those who had feared human power proved unfounded. Humanity did not seek to rule the galaxy, but to improve it. Human scientists shared their knowledge freely. Human engineers helped rebuild devastated worlds. Human diplomats resolved conflicts that had festered for millennia. The elder races, humbled by their experience, gradually came to accept the new reality. The Karathi reformed their isolationist policies. The Volanthi restructured their rigid caste system. Even the Dralacian consortium became a force for fairness rather than exploitation. And throughout it all, humanity remained true to its nature. They explored and created, and loved, and fought, and hoped. They made mistakes and learned from them. They lived fully in every moment they were given, because that was what the galaxy had finally learned to understand. About humanity, it was not their ships or their weapons that made them special. It was not even their compassion or their courage. It was their absolute refusal to accept. Tomorrow could not be better than today. Their unshakable belief that they could make a difference, no matter the odds. The galaxy had feared what would happen when humans departed. Now they understood what it meant to have them return, and they were grateful.